Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star Sports podcast presented by Underdog. I'm Blair Kirchhoff. On today's show, Star columnist Sam McDowell joins me to discuss what happened in the Missouri legislature last week. The stadium vote, which will provide funding for up to half the cost of a new or renovated stadium, passed. And now it's up to the Royals and Chiefs to decide what to do next. We talk about the options and what's happening with the offer from Kansas. After a break, Sam and I discuss what's going on with the Royals, who take a 6-game losing streak into this week's road trip. Okay, let's get started. The Missouri House closed its special session last week with votes to finance stadiums for the Chiefs and the Royals. So I guess, Sam, that means the ball is in the court of the Kansas City professional sports teams. We're all waiting to see what they want to do.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, this conversation for the longest time has, since the vote, really. So for 15 months now, I think has just been, what will these two states' bids look like for these two teams? And we have that answer now. Now, I think there's still some fine print with each offer from Kansas and from Missouri, both based on these bonding packages, but the teams know what's available to them, at least financially. I don't know if the Royals know what's available to them location-wise, but the Chiefs know that answer too. So I think the Chiefs theoretically should be pretty close to having the information they need to make up their decision.
And that's what we're really looking for now, is more information from the teams, because even though we've several sites have been identified for the Royals, especially for the Royals, up to a half dozen or more, we still don't know what location they prefer. We've got the candidates. We don't know what they prefer. The Chiefs, as you mentioned, seem to be, at least the impression is, they seem to be leaning toward a renovation project at their current location. I'm not saying it's done that the Kansas offer is not going to be accepted, and that would be to move it across the state line. Actually, for either team, right? And we'll talk about those offers in a second. But it just seems the Royals have a weightier decision when it comes to location.
Yeah, because at least with the Chiefs, there's only one option in Missouri that they're considering. They're not considering building new in Missouri. So you're pinned down to, if you go to Missouri, this is the exact project you're going to have. With the Royals, they're considering still multiple, not only locations, but different voter bases, different taxpayer bases, because the importance and the distinction with the offer Missouri and Kansas is that the Missouri one requires local funding as well. And so what would that local funding be for a Royals move stadium? You know, is it in Jackson County? Is it in Clay County? So they're not only weighing offers or options, I should say, from multiple states, they're weighing options within those states. And the Chiefs are not doing that within Missouri. In Missouri, it's just a renovated Arrowhead Stadium, which is why you're right, that I think we theoretically should be closer to learning what the Chiefs want to do.
Where does the prospect of a practice facility fit in for the Chiefs?
Yeah, so that's a good question, because that was something that surprised me in the Missouri bill. I thought it was really smart to include. Now, the Kansas has this aspect as well, to where if you choose our offer, you need to keep your headquarters in our state as well. And I know that the Chiefs have scouted multiple locations for training facility. They've also, similar to Arrowhead, have investigated just renovating their current. And we've been out there for OTAs, and we see that they're adding on now to it. Last year they put the air conditioning in the practice facility. The year before they were adding stuff, but we're in that building frequently. We know they've maxed out on it because of how tight our space is when we're in there. And
incredibly tight.
Yeah, nobody cares about that, but it does speak to they're tight in that facility. Like, they need to grow because the organization itself has grown. So I could see them renovating that, but I know that they're also looking at, hey, what are some other options in Missouri if they do choose a renovated Arrowhead Stadium and they're required to stay somewhere in the state?
You know, we're basing our conversation on what the Missouri legislature determined last week, but so I think our sense is looks like the teams will try to find a way to stay in Missouri, but that's maybe only because the Kansas offer has a deadline approaching, and by the end of June, maybe we're talking about a greater possibility of them moving to Kansas, if for no other reason, the Kansas is a better financial offer.
Yeah, two things there. First, you're right. The Star Bonds offer in Kansas expires June 30th. They will have the opportunity to extend that. I actually still anticipate that they will extend that, and the criteria for that is basically that the politicians and lawmakers there want to see that there's actual progress being made and they're not being used specifically for leverage. I think that both teams have had enough conversations with higher ups in Kansas to where I think it's foreseeable that we'll be talking about that being extended. Not for a year, but whether it's for several months, whether it's for half a year, something of that sort, I think we'll see that deadline extended, in which case I don't know that we're talking about these two teams having made a decision within the next 2 weeks. The second part, and they could, but I don't think we should consider that a given. The second thing I think is what these teams are weighing now, which you mentioned that there's a better offer in Kansas. On paper, that is just definitively true. You can get up to like 70% of your project paid for by the Star Bonds in Kansas. Missouri's offering up to half. I've talked to enough financial people that I have serious doubts about whether or not you could sell the bonds to fund 2/3 of a project in Kansas. And so I think that they're more similar in reality than they appear on paper anyway.
Okay. The other unknown about what Kansas might offer is, again, location. We're recording this on Monday, June 16th, and you and I just spent some time out at the Jewish Community Center talking to Dayton Moore, the former Royals general manager. We were standing a few hundred feet away from the Asperia campus, former Sprint campus, where there's, the Royals bought the mortgage for the land there, right, or for the structure.
An affiliate of theirs did.
Right, and that's been mentioned as a possible site if Kansas ends up getting the Royals. We drove out of there and ran into 100 stoplights and all kinds of traffic. I'm not sure how that would work as a site.
I don't either. I worry about the practicality of that. I think it's from afar nationally, and I read a couple of national pieces on it that, to me, you have to be in Kansas City to understand just how distinct these offers actually are location-wise. For what you just mentioned, I think a lot of people say it's 20 miles away. Factually true, but the Royals wanted to be downtown, and downtown and the site that you're talking about, the Asperia campus, are so drastically different to me. And it's drastically different than Kauffman Stadium for the reason you just mentioned. I mean, Kauffman and the Truman Sports Complex overall, the advantage of it is it's accessible from a lot of different areas of the city. I don't know that the Asperia campus, to your point, has that. I came from the Missouri side to go to the event we just came from, and, it's a one-lane exit to get there. I think that would be complicated. The Chiefs, too, I think that they're different projects but that's mostly based on because the location difference offers them just drastically distinct stadiums. The venues become, it's a dome in Kansas. I think it'd be probably more likely a dome than a retractable roof. You're talking about a dome stadium versus the Arrowhead that we've always known. Like, those are really distinct. So I understand that if you're literally hundreds, if not 1,000 miles away, you say, what's really the difference? When you're here in Kansas City, these are really just not the same not the same. It's not, apples, different types of apples, just what's the better finances. They're different projects too. It's not just the finances that are different.
That's a great point. You're right. One of these things is not like the other.
Yeah.
And as you were mentioning, the egress for traffic, and I'm thinking, when you go to Truman Sports Complex, you can exit, on 70, you exit at the, you get on George Brett Boulevard, where the Adams Mark used to be. or you come up 435, and there's a couple places you can exit coming up 435. If a baseball stadium was in Overland Park at 119th and was that Knoll area, somewhere in there, there is one exit off of 435, a one-lane exit off of 435, and that's the only way to get there from a majority of the population.
Anywhere in Missouri.
Yes, anywhere in Missouri, and anywhere north of 435, really.
Yeah, you're right.
So that you would have to have all kinds of road construction, reconstruction around that exit and making it easy. And it is. You're absolutely right. That's the height of suburbia right there.
Yeah.
You know, with the mall across the street and the Menorah Hospital on the south side of 119th Street.
Yeah.
I can see all kinds of.
I think you're hitting at the pros and cons that they're weighing too. Like the height of suburbia, I think they probably view as a pro. I mean, we joke all the time about what's around the Truman Sports Complex. I know they're putting in the pickleball renovation at a portion of the old Adams Mart that I think it's this month if it's not.
That's
today.
right. Yeah,
it's not even today.
Right,
it's sometime this week, I believe that's opening. But we always joke, hey, you've got the Taco Bell over there. Well, there's certainly more around that area over off Knoll for sure. I'm sure that's an attraction. I'm also confident that they're assessing the ingress and egress as a con to how do we fix that if that's their choice as well.
Yeah. It's and just the idea of stadium lights going there.
Yeah.
I bet neighbors from several blocks away might have something.
See, I think that's a really good point for this reason. When I look at downtown baseball and the vote failing last April, first of all, and I wrote this last week, I don't think that the voters rejected the idea of downtown baseball. I think they said, come to us with a better plan if you want to have downtown baseball. But I could see the team having some scars from that vote and saying Kansas City doesn't have the appetite for downtown baseball that we thought they did. But to me, when you really assess that, if you're going to move downtown, the number one overwhelming demographic you have to get are people that are downtown. You've got to get, if you're putting it in their area, you've got to get their support, and they didn't. And to me, that's what I wonder might be similar for the reason you just said about what about the traffic and stadium lights to the people who kind of like their life in that area already? Would you be encountering that same pushback from the people who are in the area, the ones saying, we don't want this in our area?
Well, yeah, might the Royals get a little NIMBY treatment, not in my backyard. Yeah. So, hey, one thing we know that I think this happened since the last time we talked about the stadium was the Chiefs have come up with a figure for the cost of their renovation. Yeah.
So last week, these two teams were basically put on the stand in front of the one of the special committees asking their lobbyists, is who each team sent to ask questions about it. And one of the Chiefs lobbyists had said that the renovation plan would be about $1.15 billion, which is increased number from the figure that they proposed ahead of the vote was $800 million, and they'd be contributing about 300. The Hunt family would be contributing 300 of 800 million. We still didn't have the gap on that 500 million. I think the hope was to get the state involved, but they didn't have it secured the way that they do now. But now, it's up to half of whatever number it would be. I have been told by some sourcing that number is not necessarily just the renovation of Arrowhead Stadium. That, I don't know whether that means that it would also include, the construction of some surrounding stuff. And look, I've been told don't expect power and light at Arrowhead, but last time ahead of the vote, they said don't expect anything else. I think they've moved off of that slightly. Like I said, it's not, someone had told me, we're not building the whole town around Arrowhead Stadium, but I do think that they would do something. So I don't know whether that includes that cost or whether it also includes the renovated. You asked about the training facility that we'd talk about, but certainly if they are going to put something in front of the voters in Jackson County, they would need to clear that up. Why 1.15 billion now instead of 800 million?
Well, another thing that needs to be understood is one thing we learned from the vote, the defeated vote last April, or 15 months ago, was the Royals and the Chiefs were not going to go together to the ballot, as they did then. So could there be two votes?
Yeah,
one for each team?
Yeah, and to me that's one of the more fascinating pieces to me of the whole thing, because I, as you know, and I think we're alike in this, I am intrigued by the strategy of all this as much as, the actual preference is just okay. But even if you decide you want to stay, there's some strategy involved in it, because you had a vote that was turned down. I think the teams should have separate conclusions for why their project was turned down, that the Chiefs would need to come forth with better renovation plans than they had. I think the way I phrased it in my column is you need to renovate your renovations. The Royals, I think, need to just provide better details to the voters than they did last time. And part of the rest of the gap is the strategy of when would you ask the voters for something. You obviously want it to be more of a standalone issue, which I think November could offer you. But if you're the Royals, and I think you were lacking details, you've got to give yourself a runway to provide those details that you didn't last time. And I don't know if I've been clear enough on this. I don't think the Royals' lack of details was an intentionality thing. I think it was they decided late on their site, and they just literally couldn't provide them in time. They didn't have them in time.
And they'd already switched sites, right? They'd gone from East Village to Crossroads.
Yeah, I mean, they were deciding between North Kansas City and East Village, and then suddenly it was the Crossroads. And they didn't give themselves a large enough runway to provide those details. So I think that should be part of their strategy, is there needs to be a long enough runway to do it. So I think next April would make sense for both teams. But then if you're looking at next April, for the Chiefs are out of season, I think you could get a boost maybe for being in season when the team's playing, potentially playing well. And the other thing is, even if they're separate, do you want to go on at the same time? Do you want to ask voters twice to approve two different taxes?
And my thought there is, if the Royals end up asking for more than the Chiefs, because the Royals are building a new stadium, we're talking about Chiefs renovation, would that affect the voters' thinking?
Yeah, well, and I think it's possible they would both ask for more, because from my understanding, the Jackson County Charter does not allow a 16th tax, whatever denomination. There's no 3/16 allowed on there, which would be half of what they asked for last time. And so I don't think they'd ask for less. I don't think they're suddenly going to ask for an eighth. I think they're more likely to go up and ask for a quarter. And then, you can't have this campaign and say no new taxes. That would be an increase on what people are already paying. I think if that goes into putting them both on the ballot at the same time. If you've got to approve two things, I could see voters picking their favorite. And I don't know if that'd be a large percentage, but it might be enough of a percentage to make a difference to say, I'll support one, but I don't know if I want to stomach paying more than I currently pay and vote for two of them.
In a different way, that's what happened in 2006 when voters were asked to vote 100%. For renovations to the Truman Sports Complex and the rolling roof.
And I think that was strategic. I've talked to some people who were around then that were not. I know you had mentioned this, and I think it's completely accurate, that Lamar Hunt was crushed when that rolling roof did not pass, that he'd anticipated it. But I've talked to some people who are more in the everyday politics of that stuff that say it's not a bad idea to give people a chance to vote no, while also getting past what you really want to get passed. And that again goes back to, do these teams want to be on the ballot at the same time, even if they are separate questions?
And we'll leave on this thought, or at least this segment on this thought. There's a time element involved here. The lease expires in early 2031. The Royals have vowed not to be playing in Kauffman Stadium past the 2030 baseball season. Yeah. It takes a good 4 or 5 years to get a new ballpark built.
Yeah, and that's when you start construction. Even when you get past, it's not like you've got shovels in the ground the next day. And so I've said this multiple times, but I never understood Frank White, the Jackson County executive's complaint that the teams were coming too early. Like, when in your life do you get punished for doing your work early? So I never understood that pushback from him. Now, obviously, a lot of his other issues with the voters sided with him, and I think some of them maybe should have been taken more seriously, but the timeline never made sense to me. Like, I always thought that the teams coming early was like a good thing, and it should have been treated as such. But you're right that I mean, if the Royals are insistent that they're not going to be playing at Kauffman Stadium, and you just count backwards, it's through the 2030 season, and you count backwards 4 seasons, and you've got to start construction, by the end of 26 probably, and that's rapidly approaching when you talk about potentially put something on the ballot in April of 26.
Absolutely. There was in some of the coverage that I read from the Missouri legislature last week, the session, one of the state senators said they wanted an answer quickly about location and cost.
Yeah.
And by June 30th is what this Politico said. I'm not sure we're going to get there. We're talking about 10 days. I'm not sure we're ready to get an answer from the Chiefs and Royals.
I do think that's just a really quick, important point as well, Blair, is that, a lot of these senators and representatives from Missouri wanted these answers before that they passed this legislation. I totally understand saying, what is your plan? We'll still have those checkpoints. I didn't view this as a blank check to these teams. You still have to go back to the state. Now, it's not going to be the same voting process among where all the reps or all the senators are going to get a vote. There still will be a state body to where you've got to get your specific project approved, in which case you do need to provide details. And if you're talking about a vote, you gotta answer to the voters too with those details. So I still think those checkpoints will come, even if they didn't come before Missouri passed this bill.
Take a swing at picking sports this baseball season with Underdog. Playing on their app is as easy as choosing higher or lower on players' stats. Get them right, and you could win up to 1,000 times your money. Sign up today using promo code KCSTAR to get a gimme pick as a part of your first cash entry, plus up to $1,000 in bonus credits when you deposit. Must be 18 plus and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org.
All right, let's switch topics. I wish it was a happier topic these days, but the Royals open up a 6-game road trip at the Texas Rangers on Tuesday. They play 3 in Texas and 3 at the San Diego Padres. And this is a team with absolutely no wind at their sails, no momentum. They're coming off of, I guess, what ties a club record for the worst homestand in history. I imagine there have been other offers, but this was terrible. Look, it's one thing to get pushed around by the Yankees. It just seems like the Royals in the last few years just can't stand up to Aaron Judge and company. But for the Sacramento Athletics to come into Kauffman Stadium on the heels of a 13-game road losing streak and to sweep the Royals, what a disaster for the Royals came into the homestand 2 games over 500. They're now 4 under, and club players only meeting after Saturday's game didn't stem the tide, and here the Royals go limping off to Texas. What do we make of the Royals?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually trying to wonder how many team meetings that the A's have prompted this year. It can't be many. But although I guess you would probably be more likely to meet after, isn't it a slap in the face of the A's? The A's, I was wondering, were probably reading that on Saturday. Losing to us is so bad, you guys got to meet about it?
It's like being the homecoming opponent in college football.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, and it's, Vinny Pasquantino, I was reading the quotes from our coverage with Jalen Thompson, and, Annie Rogers and Jalen had asked all the questions at those post games. But Vinny Pasquantino, I mean, he says it the most succinctly, the most bluntly, but it's also the most accurately, which is just how tiring are these pitchers of, Noah Cameron throws 5 shutout innings. Royals lose the game. It's the same issues over and over again, and it's getting to a point where it's only June 16th, and you've got 6 weeks before the trade deadline. And Vahe had written this last week, but it's coming time to where you're going to have to decide whether or not you're going to add to this offense or not.
You're right. That is going to be a big decision for J.J. Piccolo in the front office. And I wonder how influenced they'll be by the next week to 10 days, right? If they show no signs of improvement, they're not in a position to sell, though, are they? This is not a...
Well, I think it's Look, there's a couple, to me, that's contingent on a couple things that we're not as privy to that they would be. I don't think that Cole Reagans is going to be back in like 2 weeks. I think it's going to be a longer absence. But if they envision it being much, much longer, and like that's a piece of your playoff team, a really key piece of your playoff team. And if they think it's going to be, months and not several weeks, I think that could be influential to your ultimate decision. Seth Lugo's got an option next year. Like, they've got pieces that teams would covet, I think. And, if you're not going to make the playoffs at the end of the year, you would like to have something to show for it with, improving your farm system that has been better, but I still don't know that it's taken a significant step forward over the last couple of years.
They have not gotten the spark they had hoped from Jack Caglione. Not gonna blame Jack for this, but listen, he's heading into the road trip that starts on Tuesday. He's hitting .213, 484 OPS. He's got 2 doubles, I think, among his 10 hits. I was really hoping for his sake and for the team's sake, even if it was in a loss, just to have gotten one out of the ballpark, as he was supposed to bring the prodigious power, and we just haven't seen that from him. Doesn't that tell us just how different it is from AA/AAA to the majors? Yeah,
and it's also in the ways that I think are foreseeable, and the ways that I think made the Royals, patient with trying to bring him up and trying to give him as much seasoning as possible. And, I wrote this the day they called him up, that he swings a lot.
Yeah.
And, his chase percentage is up there. I mean, he does not walk. I think he's walked just one time this year. So that swing percentage is tested at this level in a way that I think they would like to have seen him improve that in Omaha before they called him up. There was a team that was really struggling offensively, but then there was also I think a question with them is the stuff in AAA good enough to really test that? Because he was hitting. So I can understand both sides, like the need to have him up, but it doesn't, I guess, surprise me that his first few weeks in the majors have gone this way with a guy who swings as frequently as he swings. So the Royals' position as last in the major leagues in home runs continues, and even though their team batting average isn't bad, about half, but it doesn't score runs. It does not hit the ball out of the ballpark. Starting pitching still among the top 5 or 6 when it comes to ERA and runs allowed. So it must just they won't. Nobody of course will say it publicly, but such a burden to this pitching staff to have the performances that they've delivered this year and to have very little to show for it. Yeah, I mean, and that to me hits right at the trade deadline question that they'll have to answer over the next 6 weeks, which is this pitching staff so good that you don't want it to go to waste? Because I can't recall the Royals the Royals had a great rotation last year. They did not have a good bullpen last year. They've got both this year, and it would be a shame for that to amount to nothing. I also think that they've got to be cautious not to press an issue if they don't see it there at the end of the year. Like, I don't know, I think Caglione might be a little bit of proof of this, but they've got one of the best hitters on the planet in Bobby Witt Jr., and they still have a bad offense. I don't know that they're one hitter away from solving their offensive woes. Sadly, that's a good point. Yeah. I think you're right. I sure want to see Salvi get on track. It's been too long. You're always hoping the warm weather would heat him up, but he's sitting at 5 home runs and just kind of having one of the worst seasons of his career. So tough going for Salvi and for several other Royals so far this season. Okay. Great conversation as always with Sam McDowell, and big thanks to our producers, Brandy Mason and Monty Davis, and to our editors, Jeff Rosen and Scott Chasen. This has been SportsBeat KC, presented by Underdog, and we'll talk sports in Kansas City with you again next week.